Friends, and welcome back to Alignment with Rebecca playing in the sandbox. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means when we say communication. And I know that we started early on this topic. We dove right into how to communicate with folks when they are in an emotional space, like my cat is, if you hear him out there, and how to communicate with ourselves when we are in an emotional space. Today, though, I want to talk about what communication is, because most of us are not taught to communicate when we grow up. Okay, let me take that back. We are taught to communicate, but we aren't taught to communicate consciously. And what I mean when I say conscious communication is that we are really taking a little bit of time to think about what we're saying, how we're saying it, how those words, actions, nonverbal communication will communicate to another, and to avoid reacting. Now, we talked about the problems with simply reacting on the first two videos. And really, the problem with reacting is that we don't think. And maybe that's the problem most of us have in this world anyways, is we don't take the time to really think. Now, to define communication is really difficult, and people have been trying to do it for years. There have been many what we call models of communication. The big one in the beginning was the one-way model of communication. And in some ways, I'm offering you a one-way model here. I am communicating to you. But it's not entirely true, because you can still respond back to me even if we aren't on chat, even if we aren't texting, even if we aren't face to face. You still, if you're watching this video, you have reactions. You have thoughts and opinions. You might say, what is she doing with her hair? All of these things are forms of communication. Now, of course, it's one way, simply because maybe I haven't received your feedback yet in any way, shape, or form. And that takes us to the second model. And the second model really is a two-way model. It's ping pong. I communicate, you communicate back. I communicate, you communicate back. And I think we can all see right now that this doesn't actually work very well. Now, you might think to yourself, oh, but that's exactly what happens when I text message. But again, when you're text messaging, you still have a reaction of some sort, whether it is a conscious reaction or an unconscious reaction to the message you have received. Rather, when we talk about communication nowadays, we look at it as being a transactional process, transaction, right? So transaction means that you and I, or you and we, or all of us, or even when we're alone, we are making meaning. That is, we are receiving input that allows us and our brain to make meaning from that input. And we call these pieces of input texts. And that's, of course, in mostly academia. But in general, what it means is if you're walking down the street and you see that somebody has allowed their dog to poop in the middle of the sidewalk, you're going to bring meaning to that moment. Now, you may jump to a conclusion and go, oh my God, that owner of that pet is so irresponsible. They don't even bother to pick up their dog's poop. But of course, we have no idea if it's belongs to the dog or to a cat or to a human or to a different animal. But we make meaning out of that moment, and we bring meaning into ourselves. So if we see pictures, if we hear a piece of music, if we see trash, just about any random thing in the world communicates to us. A tree communicates to us. A blade of grass communicates to us. Memes communicate to us. Trash communicates to us. And we are constantly in the process of trying to make meaning of those pieces of information that we receive. Now, when we talk about communication as being a transactional process. And especially when we're communicating with other people or other cognitive beings, including animals to some degree, we are making meaning together on a constant basis, and we are reassessing what that meaning is. We are testing out to see, oh, does this person feel the same way about I do regarding the word democracy? Does this person, are they seeing things from the same point of view as I am? This is constant negotiation. So communication is messy, just like democracy. They're messy, messy, messy processes. And the vital thing is to be engaged in that process, even though it's messy. Now, the problem is this makes us uncomfortable. Nobody likes messiness. And even if you have lived in a room or in a house or in a space that is entirely messy, you probably walk in there and go, ah, geez, I gotta clean this crap up. And then you try to put it all in order to be exactly where it needs to be. This needs to go here and that needs to go there. And then you think you're going to keep it up, but you're going to find out that the cookbook that you put in with your how-to books all of a sudden doesn't fit in there. So you have to recategorize it and put it into the kitchen. And maybe it doesn't fit where the pots and pans are. So then you think, oh, I need a shelf in the kitchen, and it goes on and on and on. There is no such thing as neat processes. Whether you're talking about communication, whether you're talking about democracy, relationships, self-help, you name it, everything is messy. Our world is messy. And it's our job to untangle those messes again and again and again. And there is no end to it. And I think that's important because our society, we look towards ends all the time. We say, I'm going to become this, and this is how I'm going to become this person, job, influencer, whoever you want to be. And when you give yourself a neat and narrow road of how to get there, you'll often find that the processes that you've chosen don't work. So everything is experimentation. Everything is constant untangling, and communication is no different. Now, one of the things I think when we ask people to define communication, or at least in my experience when I've worked with students at the college and high school level, is the immediate thing they think about are the words that come out of their mouth. Yes, verbal communication is super important, but you might be surprised to find out that it is literally the smallest piece of communication. The smallest piece. The largest piece, the lion's share of communication, is nonverbal communication. Now, depending upon who you look at, what scholar you read, you're going to find that nonverbal communication literally accounts for 79 to up to 90%, approximately, of our communication acts. And nonverbal communication is this huge category, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, and I'll break it down into pieces. But it engulfs, if you will, everything from what you wear to how you do your hair, bing, 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 to the jewelry you decide to use, to the expressions on your face, the mannerisms on your face, the hands, the little sounds that you make. Space is a form of communication. For example, spatial communication tells us a lot about a group of people and society. Do you have a huge personal space around you, or really tiny personal space around you? And that's going to also lead into things like our culture and how we are taught. So nonverbal communication says a lot. This tattoo is a form of nonverbal communication. As soon as you see it, you're going to have a meaning associated with tattoos. Either you love them, you hate them, you think that they are associated with people who are creative, or maybe people who are dumb, or whatever it is, the military. We have lots of associations, and this becomes kind of a flag. As soon as I walk up to somebody and they see tattoos here, or even worse, tattoos on the wrist, There are assumptions made immediately, and that is nonverbal communication. The last thing we need to know about communication, besides it's messy, besides that it is an act of constant renegotiation of meaning, and also that the majority of our communication acts are nonverbal, we have to deal with noise. Now, noise is exactly what you would think it is. Noise, there's different kinds of noises. Well, there's physical noises, there's psychological noises, there's physiological noises, that's the noises that come from our body, and semantic noises, which is the noises of confusing language in itself. And I'm going to break down all these different noises in subsequent podcasts, but in general, we are constantly bombarded with noises. And most of the time, because our senses, how we function as human beings, we can't take in all that sensory information, especially all those noises, that we tend to filter them out. But that doesn't mean they stop existing, nor does it mean that they stop interfering with our ability to communicate well. In fact, they are so ever present that we are constantly fighting against different noises. When I started the podcast, I don't know if it came over the microphone, but my cat was howling out there because he just ate. And after he eats, he howls because then he wants to play. And so that was a noise I had to deal with. And I couldn't totally filter it out. I just kind of needed to go with it and understand that that noise is going to be part of the process at this particular moment. So one of the noises that are the most important right now, I think, is this psychological noise. Now, this doesn't mean that you're depressed or you're anxious, although these are forms of psychological noises. But the biggest form of... Now, finally, I want to talk about our spheres of experience. And this is in almost most of the different communication models, and they're extremely important. Our spheres, P-H-E-R-E-S, of experience, refers to all the things that make us who we are as human beings. So our culture, our religion, our upbringing, the different types of entertainment we have been exposed to our entire lives, what we read, how we interpret information, all of these things informs how we will end up communicating with each other and with ourselves. And it's important to know this because a gesture in nonverbal communication, such as thumbs up here in the United States, is going to mean something entirely different in a different culture. This is a sphere of experience. So when we are consciously communicating in this very messy kind of process, we also have to be very conscious that what we say to others are going to be received in different ways depending upon somebody's sphere of experience. So that's kind of an introduction today of what conscious communication is. And I'm just going to touch on one last topic before we go into our meditation, and that is the topic of the mask. I probably should have mine around here, but I don't. So if nonverbal communication makes up 79 to 90% of our communication attempts, that means we are communicating less efficiently when we are wearing a mask. Now, when we talked about how to deal with other people who are emotional, what are the different processes we can go through to try to help calm a person down and allow them to come to the conversation from a different place, we talked about the problems with masks. Now, masks are needed, and we should all be wearing them, but we need to adopt them in such a way that they don't cause a huge problem with our communication attempts. Now, whenever we don a mask, we are doning with it all these attitudes in society. We are doning everything. For example, if we look at Black Lives Matters, as soon as the Black person puts on a mask, there are associations with that have been basically created by our entertainment systems, by our cultures, by our biases, by our prejudice that says, oh my goodness, look at, there's a black person with a hoodie on, or there's a black person with a mask on, they're going to do something bad. So again, fears of experience is going to change how we receive information. So we have to be really honest with ourselves right now about our biases, about our prejudices, about our assumptions. We need to examine our assumptions. And we need to realize that it's not just cultural assumptions, it is also an impediment to good communication. So much of how we communicate happens right here. Our mouth, our ideas of smiling, frowning, being angry, thinking, whatever it is. And when we put the mask over it, we're missing 50%, if not more, that information on our faces for other people to interpret and make meaning from. So we have to go above and beyond when we're trying to consciously communicate while we are wearing a mask. Because, we could think that our eyes speak happy, but for me, when I am concentrating, these lines get really deep, and people make a lot of assumptions about those deep lines, especially if they're not seeing the rest of my face. They might think I'm angry. They might think I'm judging them. They may think I'm standoffish. I've gotten that one before. But really, all it is I have these two very overactive muscles in my face, and I've used them a lot in my life. So I have these lines. So when we communicate with masks on, we have to be extremely aware that we're missing so much of this nonverbal communication. So we can solve this problem by adding extra gestures or emblems, thumbs up, shaka, thank you, bless you, whatever it is to supplement the communication that is coming out of our muffled mouths with a mask on. We can do this with our body language. We can have open body language rather than closed body language. We can make sure that our arms aren't crossed because there's a lot of association with crossed arms. We can have them to the side. We can wave. We can say thank you. Think about your gestures that you can have with your body as being a type of emoji. You are just amplifying the message that you're trying to send, so that there isn't a massive miscommunication happening between you and the other person or people that you're trying to communicate with. And with that said, let's go on to our meditation. It's going to be a little bit of a short one today. We're listening again to Kevin MacLeod, and this is Elf Meditation. And I'm just starting it now. I'm going to try to find some more music as we move forward, but this is really good for the moment. I want you to sit down or lay down. You can be on a floor. You can be on your chair, a couch, a bed. Just make yourself comfortable for a few moments. And I want you to focus on your breath. Simply just observe your breath. Even if you're in the middle of working, if you're standing up, just breathe for a few moments. Now, I want you to think about one of the most recent moments where you were communicating, either with yourself or others. Maybe it was with your pet. And I want you to imagine how you made meaning with that other person. Did you ask questions to clarify what was being said? Did you jump to a conclusion? Was the moment so perfect, like it happens occasionally, where you felt like your meaning was absolutely understood and you had that magical shared moment of true understanding? Keep focusing on your breath. Don't control it. Just observe. Now I want you to imagine your non-verbal communication attempts. Do you tend to speak more with your face? Gesture with your hands? Do you express yourself through your body? Now imagine that you're speaking to somebody and you both are wearing masks. Imagine a positive way that you can support your message with the tools of your body, maybe through gestures, maybe through opening your heart up, your chest, in a gesture of acceptance. Maybe you're playing with your eyebrows. Or you decide to wear a shirt that has a positive, uplifting message. So when people see you, they can rejoice in the message you are sending out to the universe. Now, if you can, close your eyes gently. And return to observing your breath. Count in with the inhale for a count of 5. Hold your breath for a count of 1 or 2. And then elongate your exhale for a count of 6 or 7. This will help your nervous system calm down and give you more control over your choices. Let's breathe in together for a few moments. when you are ready, slowly wiggle your fingers and your toes. Maybe stretch your shoulders. Gently open your eyes. Take in all that meaning in front of you, every object that communicates throughout the day. And I encourage you to think about, be conscious of the words you choose, the intent behind those words, the gestures and body language you use, and the intent behind that nonverbal communication. How can you communicate today consciously, compassionately, and with joy? I know you can do it. I believe in you. Have a lovely day. Mahalo and namaste. Until tomorrow at 9 a.m.